It gives me no pleasure to say it, but it's an Unai Emery masterclass in Arsenal not taking their chances. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, Buckman, Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about today's conversation is definitely going to be execution versus opportunity, and why it is that attacking execution was off at Villa Park on Saturday, and maybe has been off all season at some level. Definitely an important part of the conversation. There may be some refereeing discussions, but I will say this: Dale Johnson's column, if you're not familiar with it, he does a VAR review every week of all the contentious decisions that's come out. He has determined that all the decisions in our game were correct. So I think that draws a line under that nicely and settles it. So good to have that behind us. We could pivot today to a women's podcast and talk about Arsenal beating Chelsea. That would be a fun conversation. We could pivot to a United podcast and talk about what should have been 4, but was only 3 that Bournemouth hung on them at Old Trafford. We could pivot to a Chelsea podcast, which would also be fun, and talk about whether Nico Jackson should be banned for his choking or whether he should be dropped for his choking in front of goal. If you get my, because he choked someone with his hands, but he's also a choker in front of goal. There's lots of Schadenfreude out there if you choose to accept it. There's Arsenal women beating Chelsea. Chelsea just in the mud as a club in general, if you choose to accept it. But alas, my friends, we are going to talk about Arsenal losing to Aston Villa at Villa Park. And we'll contextualize it a bit. We'll talk about what didn't work, certainly what might have worked on another day and where it leaves us. And it is my great pleasure to talk about that today with Clive. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello. How are you?
Good to see you. Yeah, I'm doing all right. I mean, look, the idea, theoretically, we might not have lost another game all season, but I think we were always going to lose another game. And you know what's really weird to me, Clive? There is an incredible rise, and maybe this is just internet culture in general, an incredible rise in the analysis of football being down to the last game anybody watched. I mean, I'm seeing articles that Spurs are still title challengers or would be the top of the table were it not for injuries because the last game people watched Spurs look good. You know, I mean, it's, you know, I've certainly seen Arsenal fans that are having concerns based on a loss to Villa when, as I said, we were always going to lose another game. And as I regard it, we've lost twice this season. In both instances, we were the better team. I think it's 1 point dropped at Newcastle, and I think it's 3 points dropped at Villa. But it is a little weird, isn't it, Clive, this sort of recency bias overload in football analysis where the last game you watch determines your entire worldview.
You're absolutely right. I often take every football match as almost like an exec meeting, right? And you got this meeting you got to prepare for, and you walk into the room and you have, I used to call it luggage, Elliot. Mental luggage. I've got luggage on me.
I got all kinds of baggage.
I got luggage in me. I'm sitting down and I'm going to say, this is what I expect to see today. And if I don't see it, I'm going to tell someone. I'm going to say something in the meeting. And then when I walk out of the meeting, the last thing I've heard sticks in my brain. And that's how that provides my next action, shall we say. You know, so, and we all walk into a meeting with different things in our mind. And that's we walk into every game with different thoughts in our mind, with different priorities about what we expect to see, who we expect to see it from. And that's personal to us, right? Individual to us. And it's interesting. I do think some of the analysis that we pay for could be a bit sharper, shall we say? But hey, they're never gonna be as nerdy as us. So maybe you have to accept the gap in that analysis, basically.
Yeah, and look, it's not a big deal. It's more to the point that I don't care about this particularly in the context of the wider football conversation. If people want to think Spurs are a great team, like that's fine. We've seen this movie before and we know how it ends. But
No worries.
I think in the context of Arsenal and specifically Arsenal fans, it is incredible to me how quickly the quality of our play and the successes of our season and the trajectory of our overall performances and results is swept aside by a loss. And I guess I would just say we've lost twice this season, both away, both at difficult places to go. Once where I think we were wrongly denied a point in a game we were better. And in this game, I think more of the blame falls on us. Let me be clear. I think the overwhelming majority of it falls on us. But I watch that game and I say, if we play that game 10 times, we win 7 of them, we draw 2 of them, we lose the 1 we lost. I think it is maximum punishment for what I don't regard as a necessarily poor performance. But I'll ask you this, then we'll get into the specifics. because I do find this a little confounding. Is a performance good if you create lots of openings, but fuck them all? Or does that mean it was a bad performance? You know what I mean? Like if every time you get in on goal or break a high line, you blow it. Because it's not that long ago, we were laughing at Chelsea for only scoring 4 against 9-man Spurs. And this game had similar patterns in that we continued to break the high line and continued to flub every single opportunity that came with it.
Yeah, not quite as bad as Chelsea because it was 9-man scenario.
Well, it was not, yeah, right. But I mean, a similar pattern in the way it was going.
Yeah. And sitting on our settees, we can see all the gaps. So it's really relevant to us. We can see what's happening. And it's not very often that I'm quite positive about a game before we go into it. But I did a little bit of looking at Aston Villa, and I actually said the words, "We're not dumb as other teams. We will find a way through their line." Those are the exact words I used. I was really encouraged. I was even encouraged by Martinelli coming off against Luton because I thought he'd be fresh for the weekend. He's going to be the man. And that didn't quite work out. And I read today that he's missing training because he's ill. So maybe there was a problem there. You know, you never know, right? You never know what a player walks into a game with. And so, yeah, it does feel a little bit like a wasted opportunity. And even during the game, the amount of times we were nicking the ball high, I'm thinking, oh, mate, it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time. One of these is going to come right. Then we'll run away the game towards the end of it. So I do think performance matters without sounding like Mikel Arteta himself. But the fact we're not getting smashed in the papers today tells you that people know what they saw, you know, and performance does matter. Spurs and other teams' performance was good or bad, and so they're focused on the people whose performance are bad. I think we played worse at Chelsea for the first 70 minutes.
I agree.
I don't think we were that great against Fulham at home. You know, honestly, I don't think we were that great. We played for 25 minutes in that game, you know, and so with this game, wow, we were fantastic. A few details that were off. When I say fantastic, I could see our team, Elliot. I could see our team doing the right stuff. The details of execution were off, and you don't need to be. And we could all see that because we got a nil next to our name. We got nilled, and so the details are off. But the way we played was, in principle, was fine.
Yeah, 12 shots to 10. So, you know, not a blowout in that respect. But, you know, on XG, again, the only reason I bring up XG is I think it does a nice job of encapsulating the danger created in terms of the chances taken. 1.4 to 0.6. Now, 1.4 is a little lower than I'd like to see. But when you get 1.4 XG, you'd like to come away with at least a goal. The 0.6, though, I think stands out again in that this is another game where I think we controlled it reasonably well. I think we restricted them to relatively little. But that means we have to talk about their goal and then how the game flows from there. So we'll go back to the beginning. I mean, from a lineup standpoint, I'll throw this out there and ask you if you agree. I think so. So let me be clear how I'm saying this. Not opponent adjusted, because sometimes you need a special lineup for a special opponent. So take out opponent adjustment. On a base level, I regard this as our strongest 11, non-opponent adjusted. Would you agree with that?
I think, yeah, up to a point. But obviously, if I'm projecting, I prefer the muscle of a Jurriën Timber based on what I've seen. But obviously, you're not available, right? So,
yeah.
And I'm not, again, you know me, Elliot, I'm not against a Tommy Asset at left back.
I agree, but I think that's more an opponent adjustment, right? Like you do that in certain
you could say that. Again, we're different how we look at football. I'm someone who likes to look at games. You know, the coaches that I talk to, I always say, or try to advise, if they don't listen to me, but I say to them, mate, have a look at the game. 15 minutes, have a look at it. You can always make a change. Have a look and see what they do. You've done your research, but maybe they do something else. Have a look at the game from a defensive base, which is solid. Control the scoreboard, you control your afternoon, you control your life. That's where I come from. But I recognize, Elliot, that the way we dominate the last, again, recency bias, the way we dominate the last third of the Luton game with Zinchenko and Trossard on the pitch, why wouldn't you have that player on the pitch versus Aston Villa and dominate the game, which we did. So it's just an approach difference, a style difference. I don't think it's a wrong or right answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think I regard it as our strongest. Again, not opponent adjusted. And I only raise that to say that I don't see any reason why this team that we put out against Villa should execute the way it did. But we'll have to talk a little bit about that. So we start the game, I think, on the back foot. And look, it's a cauldron. It's loud. There's a lot of emotion, and it does take you time to come to grips with that. And I think a home team at a ground like that is always going to have that initial burst. And they get their goal during that initial burst when we haven't really found our footing in the game yet. And it reminds me of the Lons goal in a sense, right? Remember the Lons away goal? Like Raya makes a mistake.
Perfect.
But the execution is flawless.
Yeah.
I think there are some mistakes in this goal, for Arsenal mistakes, but I also think the execution is nearly flawless. What's funny about it, Clive, is this goal is a Rorschach test because you can see in it the error from the player you want to see. You can see Zinchenko getting sucked in and getting bypassed. You can see Ben White not getting tight enough. You can see Gabriel swimming in space a little bit. You could even, if you want to, I don't know anyone who wants to see weakness in Declan Rice, but I certainly think he makes the wrong decision to leave the center of the box and go chase the ball when that's not on. And even Raya, who I think does nothing wrong because the shot is hit so hard from such close range, because his arms are sort of there, you could see it as Raya should get his hands to it.
Agreed.
I don't agree with that. And I guess this is the problem, right? In every goal, you can choose to see the errors that allow it, or you can choose to see the exceptional execution. For me, Clive, I think this is 95% exceptional execution. I'd like to see Zinchenko not get bypassed quite so easily. I definitely like to see White not get turned and have Mikel lose his marking so easily. And White really has his head in his hands at the end, which I think tells you a little bit about his sense of his culpability. But for me, this is a quintessential example of what we didn't do in the game. They have one good move, all the passes are right, all the last actions are right, and it results in a goal.
I think you phrased that really well about you can decide who you want to put the blame on. So then we take that up a level, right? And team talk time. You do the team talk. You're going to play against Arsenal. Where do you attack? Where do you attack? You tell me. Where do you attack? I'm asking the question. What side do you go down?
It's a question. I get to answer it. You go down Zinchenko's side, obviously.
So there you go.
And by the way, I think that's sometimes phrased as you go down that side because Zinchenko's vulnerable. I think that's partly true. But I also think the way we set up, spacing-wise, with Zinchenko coming so far into the interior, you have space to attack on that side that you have less of on the right side. I think the right side is more congested than the left side.
Yeah, I need to look at. I just wanted to say that because that's the thing that's repeatable, and that's the reason why that position's been a little bit rotated, because you want to protect it for certain periods of a game. Back to my original statement about how you look at a team. What's your game model for that day? And if your game model is to get on the ball and dink over their back line, then we had chances before they scored. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it wasn't if we started slow. We didn't. They just did something beautiful.
Their goal comes right after Saka has one of the best chances of the game, which, by the way, Martinelli, who not his sharpest day by a mile, does play in a beautiful ball. And while I think that's a hard chance, I think Saka normally wraps his foot around that. He just doesn't quite get it around.
Doesn't quite get it. The ball's traveling a long way. Doesn't quite meet it perfectly, but it's explainable. And so that's the issue. Every team's got a gap. Every team's got a gap. We're playing Liverpool in a week's time. Where do you think we're going to go? What side do you think we're going to go for?
Down Trent's.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just a matter of whether you want to wear that or not. And some days we don't wear it, and then we can't pass the ball forward. So it's just a trade-off. To quote Scott, it's just a trade-off. What do you want to do? What do you fancy doing on that day? What's your control aspect? Where's your team? So yeah. I think for me, goals normally like dominoes. There's a domino effect, isn't there? And Zinchenko jumps in. If he drops off into the space, then maybe we delay and they go around the houses and they don't go through. But he jumps in, and once he jumps in, domino effect starts. Gabriel goes out, then Rice has to go out. We don't recover in quickly enough. He goes into the box, he does a quick spin. Rice is not tight enough. Goalkeeper goes for his arm. You're absolutely right. beautifully put, Elliot, which shuts everyone up. They're now thinking, damn, I blame the keeper.
Yeah.
Rice is a bit of, I'm sorry, it ain't Declan because he's brilliant, right? But maybe, but that Ben White, well, you know what I mean? He's been a bit dodgy the last couple of weeks. He needs to get tighter. He got turned by Rashford a couple of years ago. He needs to get tighter. So we all go through it, don't we, in our minds, and that's our job, right? And so yeah, it's one of those. But let's just say it's a good goal. Good goal.
Yeah.
Got loads of time to come back. Let's go and slice them and dice them, which we did, right? But it just didn't score.
Yeah. And I mean, it is frustrating when you concede, and it is normal to want to pick on someone. Look, I understand the temptation to want to say that Zinchenko is a bit of a liability. I think in a lot of the situations this season where we looked vulnerable, he has at least been involved, if not directly culpable. And I think you'd be defending him too much to deny his culpability in the times we've looked vulnerable. I simply think that you must acknowledge his essential involvement in what we do in possession and progression and chance creation, and have an answer for how you intend to replace that or cope with that. If you're thinking you're going to replace him, and maybe it is Timber. And we've mentioned this before, but you look at Manchester City. Not only did they not decide to go with Zinchenko in that role, they decided not to stick with Cancelo in that role, and they went with 4 center backs. And they've prioritized solidity, and they won the treble when they did that.
And they may evolve. They may evolve again, though. In it, they may evolve again. They evolved into that solution because they were conceding. They stopped conceding and gave it to the 40, 50 goal guy up top. Do you know what I mean? So, but they evolved.
Yeah, but this is the thing again that you're just going to have to figure out, because he led us in progressive passes as he always does. He led us in final third entries as he always does, right? And in a game where we
it's how you judge him. Sorry, let's chop you. It's how you judge him, right? So I know he's not a stick-on defender. He's going to smash you in one-on-ones. I know that. He nicks it, he steals it, he stays in the room, right? He jumps forward, he goes fishing. That's the term. You heard me use that term before? Let me go fishing for it. My mates will get on the back foot for me. If I nick it, I drive forward and create a chance. Risk and reward, right? So he goes fishing for the ball. My critique of Zinchenko on this day, I don't even want to go here, but I'm already there, mate, is that this wasn't a day for pauser. Do you know what I mean by that? To get on the ball, have a little look at myself, step on it, turn around. Nah, this wasn't a day for pauser, mate. This was a day for get it, out of your feet, clip. Clip, clip, clip. If Granit Xhaka was standing there, mate, he would have had about 25 aggressive passes into last third. He wouldn't have think about it. Yeah, I'm not going to turn away from the obvious. I'm just passing it right there. Different shapes, sizes, mate. It's going in there because they are weak in that space, and that's where the dope was. And I felt that we was a little bit playerish, use that term in the IR, and we were turning away from the obvious on occasions. Maybe that's the guy on the settee with a fantastic TV angle, desperate for us to equalise, giving my analysis. But I do feel we were wasteful in our pass selection, and because of that, because the forwards are looking at that green grass area and they can see Christmas presents ahead of them. It's that psychological timing and that cohesion that you know what your forward wants, you know when he wants it, and you need to do it first because he ain't making 2 runs. Do you see what I mean? And it's not possible because you're off, because they're going to hold their line. So that was where my critique was on the day, and that's why he was my stock falling, really. But that maybe was in the emotion of the post-game analysis.
No, it is difficult when you have a player who has a weakness. It's funny. We do scouting videos over on Patreon, and sometimes I think we come away with wrong analysis, but I think a lot of times we get to see something that your YouTube comps aren't going to show you. And we came away, I think, with a pretty clear conclusion about Zinchenko, which is he is a transformative on-the-ball player in the fullback position who is going to give us a lot of skills, capabilities, options that we have not had in the past. We are going to see times when he looks vulnerable. I don't think anything has changed in that assessment. But again, here is a guy who was second in touches only to Declan Rice. Rice had 89, he had 84. He led us in tackles. As I mentioned, final third entries, he paced us. Progressive passes, he paced us. So the question is, if Tomiyasu is fit, can you get enough of that stuff without the vulnerability? If a Timber is fit, I think maybe you can, and it'll be interesting to see how we evolve. But for right now, I don't see Zinchenko as such a liability. We can't win big things with him. And just to make it clear again, Villa had one very good move that I think he has a role in, but it's not an error by him. I think he has a role in it. I think a lot of players have a role in it. They convert it brilliantly. They had 0.6 expected goals, and they came away with 1 goal. And on days like that, I think to point the finger at the vulnerability of your left back is a little petulant, but I can totally understand if people are carrying baggage, to your point, Clive, baggage from prior performances where he has been vulnerable and cost us much more than I think he did in this game. What were you asking me?
I think your original assessment is right. You said if you wanted to go somewhere on that goal based on your luggage you bringing into the room, you can go there. But mate, I'm not worried. Don't let people take you down this road. He's a good player, and he allows us to dominate football matches in a way that I've not seen until he arrived. So, and there are days where he is super sharp, and there are days when he's not. I think he's a player. If you want to take the overall lesson, Elliot, mate, just manage his minutes, because I think he's defensively sharp when he's rested, when he feels fresh, and I think there's no problem with him. Every now and again, he's to be taken out. And we've got players to do it, but funny enough, we haven't. You see what I mean? Because we lost a couple. That maybe is the issue, really.
I mean, he gave us a couple of sensational goals just 2 games ago, right? Off the left-hand side,
when rested.
where he was incredibly important for us. And then he was rested against Luton. And by the way, I think a lot of people looked at that performance and said, we needed that technical play. It's funny, right? When he's not in there, people say, it was a Zinchenko game, right? Yeah, but when he's in there, they say, he's a liability. But the funny thing is, I don't think either person is wrong. The liability is available to be seen, as is the benefit. So one interesting, I think, data point to tell you, I actually think XG is an interesting way to look at this game. Shots, we'll certainly talk about the actual stuff we saw with our eyes, not just spreadsheet stuff. But I think an interesting way to compare and contrast this game is with this. We made 30 final third passes to their 20. We made 16 passes into the penalty area to their 2. Okay? And as a last data point, we had 35 touches in their penalty area compared to 16. So, 14. The reason I bring up those stats, Clive, is I think they reflect what we're going to get onto now, which is we broke the high line. We made the passes into the hurtful area. We got into the part of the pitch with numerical superiority that you want to get into. And time and time and time again, we simply did not execute. And this, I think, is the meat of the conversation around this game for me. I don't think this is new. I do think all season long, we have not been as effective executing in the final third. And it's interesting because we've had a lot of conversations this season where I've said, I can't really point a finger at Mikel Arteta because I think Mikel is putting the players into the right place on the pitch and it's their job to execute. I think we've got a conversation to be had a little bit about whether we have the firepower because we're getting into good positions game in, game out. I don't know that we're getting enough goals. And that's an interesting one. And by the way, just as we get onto that, Mikel watching from the gods, watching from the stand, and I think that there can be benefits from that. But as a question for you about that, given that this was a game where that last action needed to be right, if Mikel had been on the touchline, do you think he might have had an opportunity to call someone over and tweak something and say, hey, we're getting in, but look for the cut back to the penalty spot, or hey, we're getting in, hold the ball a second longer, whatever that adjustment was, do you think he might have, because with the amount of time we got in, I wonder if Mikel had been on the touchline and been able to make a little adjustment. He might have been able to get a Martinelli, for example, to make a quicker decision or understand where the opening was going to come from that maybe Stuyvenberg wasn't able to.
Mate, I know there are communications going on, etc. And while the coaches were sitting with him, you can talk to him when it goes down to the bench. But playing football all my life, when the manager's standing there, you just run a bit quicker. You run a bit more. You run differently. You look to the side and you're used to his voice. There's 60,000 people in the stadium, but you can hear one voice. Do you know what I mean? Because your mind is attuned to that voice. And that's just the way it is. I think it's a huge price to pay for celebrating a 97th minute winner. It's just ridiculous. But Elliot, I'm trying to get over the referee side of things. So you're trying to get me back to my counselor, right? So yeah. Well, what can I say? What can I say? Yes, I think the price is massive. What are you giving to the game by sticking the manager up in the stands? What are you doing? If a manager goes up to a referee and poking his finger in his chest where the world can see it, you've got to protect that referee. You've got to look after him because there are referees across the country that are scared to run to their cars in the car park after a game. You can't have that. So you have to set an example. But for someone celebrating a goal, you've got 2 cars for celebrating 2 late winners. What are we doing? No, seriously, what are we doing to the game? And it's a product. I love seeing Klopp run on to his goalkeeper with like an old dad whose trainers on the pitch with a last minute local derby winner. I love that. What's the problem? Do you know what I mean? So yeah, Elliot, it cost us. I don't care what you say, it cost us. And I'm waiting for the next one to come down. So yeah, let's see.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. So, and by the way, again, I gave you the stats on how many times we got into the penalty area, how many times we got into the final third. I think this is a really interesting data point. Arsenal are first in the Premier League in attacking third touches. We are second in the Premier League in attacking penalty area touches. We are 10th in non-penalty XG. So we get it in the final third more than anybody else. We have it in the penalty area, second most in the league. And yet we can only convert that into the 10th best non-penalty expected goals. Now, some of that is because we're facing lower blocks. We've got more defenders, behind us, behind the ball. And I get that. But I think some of it, Clive, points to what we had in this game. And I take notes and the number of times, obviously there's Martinelli to Saka right before the goal. But there's another counter right after that on 15 minutes where Saka has a shot blocked. There's another recovery with no shot at the end of it. Martinelli wastes it in the 20th, and Emi Martinez started time wasting early on. Saka gets in the 25th, but can't get across past Emi Martinez. Another good ball recovery that turns into nothing in the 28th minute. A Saka shot in the 32nd minute. An Odegaard shot wide with better options available in the 34th minute. Martinelli chips Emi Martinez, and it's cleared off the line in the 35th minute. Odegaard with the huge miss after Martinelli plays to Kai, plays to Jesus, plays to Odegaard, right, with the layoff in the box. Huge miss from Odegaard. And Emi goes down early. I think if he roofs that, it's a goal in the 37th minute. This is just first half, by the way. Gabriel Jesus has one palmed away really well, a curler, right, in the 42nd minute. And then right before halftime, Gabriel Martinelli's in 3-on-none. And doesn't get his control right, and we don't even get a shot. And that's just what I wrote down before halftime. Clive, that's not good enough from players. You and I have been messaging each other. These guys aren't the plucky young kids anymore. These guys are on multi-6-figure per week
200 club
wages. Yeah, they're in the 200 club. Jesus is in it. Martinelli's in it. Saka's in it. Saka certainly deserves it, obviously. Odegaard's in it. We want this to be an attack that can go toe-to-toe with the Cities and the Liverpools. And with what was created in this game, that just isn't good enough. So is there a problem there, or is it an off day? How do you evaluate the number of times we got in and couldn't make the right last action?
If you look around the league, the schedule at the moment is tough for everybody. Everyone's struggling with injury, and we're doing okay. For me, we should be top, but we're 1 point off the top. If Liverpool 1 point behind us, we wouldn't be thinking we're running away with it. So let's just get ourselves in order, shall we? We're doing absolutely fine. We're coming off a game where we smashed them in every single category apart from the one that really matters. So things are okay. Now, if I take my head up out of my backside and look down on the club and say, where are we? What's happening here? Tuesday night, Gabriel Jesus, immense at Luton. Elliot, you couldn't stop talking about it. I couldn't stop you and Tim talking about it. You were so happy with his performance. At the weekend, he got a kick early in the game. He looked a bit tired to me. Would that be fair? He looked a bit tired. Martinelli and Saka looked a little bit mentally not quite as sharp as they normally are. Jesus gets a chance to trap one in the box with his knee, sends it 5 foot the other way. Oh. sends it 5 foot the other way. That's the same guy that we were throwing so many flowers at him, we couldn't believe it 4 days earlier. And so the issue for me is if I step back and I say, what do I need to fix here? The issue is when he is having that day, I bring on somebody else, or my options may not be at the same level which we are growing accustomed to. And that is not a critique on those players, but the gap is widening between what we really know works versus what we hope will work. It's widening. Jesus is a perfectly good centre forward for Arsenal Football Club. Is he? I'm just picking on him for a moment, right? But it could be any of the front three. What we have to do is say to ourselves, we need an attack that's going to work every 3 days. Every 3 days, for sometimes 6 weeks, 5-week blocks. And I need to fix that. I need to make sure we have the right energy and quality. The right energy and quality is when I need to make a change or protect legs, it's still there, and the trust and the hope is still there. At this moment in time, when those guys have a dip, you know what we do? We play them through that dip. And that's why Saka's played 80 odd games in a row until recently. We play them through that dip, and so that's the next step for us, isn't it? The next step for us is to add another fast winger, so the pace is still there, and maybe another centre forward at some point that brings a little bit more box presence or whatever you like. Take your choice. I don't really care. Take your choice. We need a group of 5 or 6 attackers. 6 attackers that we really trust. At the moment, we probably got 4. If we're honest, 4. And we need to lift that by 2. And that's the next step for our club, right? And until then, we have to manage legs, rest people, create rest periods that we're going to do this week, hopefully. And I guarantee when they're back fresh and bombing, it'll be like Luton again. We'll be singing their praises, So that's just where we are in it.
Interesting to point out, by the way, that after the weekend's results, we have massively widened our lead at the top of the XG allowed table. And as painful as it is not to score and to lose, we continue to restrict teams to very, very little. Villa execute 1 goal brilliantly, but they had almost nothing else to offer. There were a few chances sort of late when we're scrambling for things. I'm going to read you a tweet that James Benge sent out around, I want to say, the 50th minute. Gabriel Martinelli has as many penalty box touches as the entire Villa team. Harsh reality is, I can't think of one where he has executed well, and he's not alone in that regard. Most of what stands between Arsenal and parity is themselves. I have to agree that Martinelli didn't execute in this game, and he's an interesting player because, as you know, he is absolutely one of my favorites. And by the way, I used to think you shouldn't express that you have favorites. Of course you should have favorites. Like, having favorites is a totally normal thing. But we're looking at a guy that's on 2 goals and 2 assists, 1.8 expected goals and 1.9 expected assists this season. He's a guy who we had massively high hopes for, in part because when he was very young, his underlying metrics were so eye-catching. You said, there's not a lot of players in world football doing this at this age. I think this season has been a tough one for him. He's playing very wide, right? He's hold the width, stretch the pitch guy. And that's an important role. And maybe that means he's not able to be as close to goal as we'd like. When he gets penalty box touches, we saw this in the data review with Giant Gunner, his penalty box touches are sort of at that outer extremity of the widest part of the penalty area. He's not getting into shooting locations as much as we might like. But from those areas that he gets into that are good, I don't think his delivery has been as good as I'd like it. And in this game in particular, I thought it was poor. Now, you mentioned he apparently is ill. He won't make the trip to PSV. So there may be something there. He also took a knee in the back against Luton and looked really stiff. But I struggled to offer those, quote, excuses, unquote. They're real, but only because I think we've seen some of this throughout the season. And I sort of wonder how you look at his performance in the context of his season overall, because I think he's a player that we can rightfully say probably has to go up a level. By the same token, I think Bukayo Saka has broken our brains a little bit on what young players should be doing consistently. His end product is so good and his level is so high that we want Martinelli to be at that level, and we think he has the talent to be at that level, but there's almost no one playing at that level. So it's a natural comparison, but it's almost an unfair one. So where do you come down on that?
Let's dig into this a little bit, right? So again, if you want to look at reasons why, and I do it all the time, I was patient with Havertz, and And I'm still trying to be because I can see something, and I can see something in Martinelli. So let's be patient with him, right? So the way we play our average position, we tilt to his side. So he's the highest point in our attack. So he's the one that stays highest and widest most weeks. On occasions, it tilts the other side, and it's a Saka day, and he goes highest and widest and stays high, depending on who we want to pin, which side we want to pin. And so people are saying, "Oh, we're not getting enough movement around him." I think there's enough movement around him. I think it's different movement, and I think he has to be different in his movement. There's nobody, in my view, telling me that he has to stay on that touchline continuously. He can move with it, and he has received the ball a lot in central areas. See that clip for Brazil when he was taking a centre forward position, really deep and turning around? He does that for us, and actually he's not protecting it very well, if I'm honest with you, but deep sometimes, and he loses it, and then he rolls inside. So the variation of movement and the ability for him to move and offer different shapes and faces is there, as long as someone else goes into his space, which Havertz has done on occasion and been extremely wide. And on other occasions, Zinchenko has been wider than he normally has. Tomiyasu has been wider than he normally has. So this team is evolving, and as it should do. As it should do. My little issue with him is when he goes hard, and I felt early in the season he was going to the touchline a lot on his left foot, into the dark. All you're going to get is a corner, and at best, or you get stuck into the advertising hoardings, right? For what? For a goal kick, and you end up feeling your ankles as you're stepping up. Sprint forward, stop, check, come inside, inverted cross. When Saka does that inverted cross, we all lean forward off our chairs, right? Because we think he's going to put it on the spot. When Martinelli stops, comes inside, got the same technical ability in his right foot, he puts it into the photographers more often than not. And that's the stuff he has to calm down. You've done your fire, you calm down, you do your ice, stop. And those details of contact really matter. Really matter.
Yeah.
Deliver on that side, on that inverted cross into the back post, similar to the one that Saka could have scored in earlier on. Can you put a bit more appreciation on it? And by the way, the cross he put at Anfield last year when Jesus heads it in, that's what I'm talking about. That's in your locker. That is in your locker. Focus on that when you're in wide areas. Make sure you deliver. And also, he's got when Jesus comes back in. I'm not too sure where Jesus. We didn't play. He wasn't that great in this game. If I'm honest with you, I thought he took some hits. His positional discipline wasn't as good. And Martinelli needs him to bounce. He needs him to bounce. He hasn't quite got the bounce relationship with Havertz yet. They got the underlap relationship going, but they haven't got the bounce relationship going. That bounce is important to him because I think what we have lost, Elliot, is his shots. And I've got your words in my ears saying Martinelli's a shot monster. Well, I don't think of that anymore. I think of him he's a creative, wide player that can score goals. I don't think he's a shot first player. And when he introduced to us, I thought he was a shot first speed merchant. That's what I thought he is. He's a much more rounded player now. His defensive play is excellent. Positional is excellent. His crossing is decent, right? We're nitpicking here, right? And his team play is outstanding. What he does for his teammates, etc. But he's got to focus on that last action, mate. He really does. He's in the 200 club, and he's got every skill set: left foot, right foot. He can stop you, start you. He can curl it. He can reverse it. There's nothing he can't do. He just got to focus on doing it. Honestly, these are first world problems, Elliot. Honestly, they are.
Yeah. Think about the number of times he beats his man. I mean, we've seen him have Kyle Walker in the washing machine, right? We've seen him have great players with their head spinning around like tops. But when we picture those moves, where do we picture the ball going? To the roof of the net, out in a touch, too far across. He had 6 take-ons in this game. None were successful. Like, just wasn't a good game. And I'm not worried about Gabriel Martinelli. Let's be clear. We're not going anywhere if Gabriel Martinelli doesn't have a good season. So,
yeah, he will.
I like Leo Trossard, and I think he's a good player who has a shout for playing more. But if you thought Martinelli wasn't particularly sharp in this game, what do you think Leo Trossard's cameo was way worse? Like, and that's, by the way, that's not a knock on Trossard, who's been an excellent signing. It's the point that Martinelli has the talent. I think the reason we get frustrated with players sometimes, you're rarely going to get as frustrated with a player who doesn't have the talent as the one who does. But let's face it, the amount of times we got in past that high line and didn't execute was very, very frustrating to see. And I think the only player that came away with real credit from this game of our front 5 was Kai Havertz. And I guess the good news, the really good news out of this game, in addition to the fact that we just didn't get beaten in the sense of we weren't outplayed. We kind of failed to execute. Is that Kai Havertz put another good performance together, and but for, I'd say, a convoluted judgment at the end of the game, he'd have the equalizer as well. So would you say that's the really bright spot from this game, Clive, is Kai Havertz putting another good performance together, probably his like fourth or so in a row?
Yeah, I think he's finding his space in the team. People will adjust to that as they see fit. Some people say, well, he ain't doing that much. Well, yeah, I think he is. And I think oppositions are now starting to see him and they're going to have to plan for him. On that back post cross, I'm not sure Eddie was so close, by the way. And there are pictures that say that Eddie got the last touch. And so if Eddie got the last touch, the goal should have stood. But you know what, Elliot? I'm not going into that referee room so much today because I need to sleep, right? And and basically, if you want to go down that path, you end up in a bad place, right? So, but yeah, I really like this player. I like what he's bringing to the team, and I like his fight. Actually, I like his fight. I like his synergy with Jesus, and I mean, the first few seconds of that game, he had a blocked shot with his left foot, and the power he put into it is blocked. And I'm thinking, yeah, you've come to play today. He just looks more physical and ferocious, and I thought Jorginho had an interview last week at The Athletic, and he spoke about him. He sort of said, you look at him, he shouldn't be strong, but he's strong. You look at him and think, well, you're too skinny, you haven't got a shot. He's got a shot. He puts the ball in the corner, and you think, well, he can do what he likes. And those players are the players that fascinate me, that they shouldn't be able to do what they're doing, and they can just do it. They don't stop running. They've got energy to burn. They're unbelievable in the duels. They're the ones. They shouldn't be able to do that, and he does it. And so yeah, he's on his way. Let's see. Not every day will suit him. We might need an on-the-ball player, much more high-touch, progressive passer to somebody else on occasion. But you can start to see the future, can't you, with that midfield three? And it looks fine to me. And now they just need to evolve and build on their relationships. 2 of that 3 on you. Regardless of their price, 2 of that 3 on you. Most other clubs, that would be what you call a midfield rebuild. So 2 of that 3 on you, right? Liverpool have got a new midfield, and everyone's talking about it. We've got a new midfield, and it's expensive, but it's got 3 24-year-olds with a lot of time ahead of them, and it looks good to me.
Do you remember the Lens game, the home Lens game, just a couple weeks ago?
Mm-hmm. I was there.
Right. Havertz scores, Jesus scores, Saka scores, Martinelli scores, Odegaard scores. And then we get the Jorginho penalty late. It felt like every time we had a move where we were in, we executed. We had the same number of shots or one more shot in that game that we had in this game. Yep. We produced 6 goals. And this is the thing I can't help but think about this game. I'm not saying Lens are as good as Villa, but I think the performances remind me of each other in the sense that on that night we got in, and when we got in, we were absolutely ruthless. Every pass that went into the box went to an Arsenal player, and every Arsenal player who touched it in the box put it in the back of the net. And against Villa, we couldn't do that. And that it's unsatisfying to analyze football that way. But I can remember, I think years and years and years ago, maybe just after the Invincibles thing, I want to say in Champions League group stage, we maybe we went to CSKA in Moscow or something. And we absolutely battered them. I mean, I don't think I've seen us blow a team off the pitch like this. We didn't score a goal. The last action is the hardest thing in football, and some days it doesn't go for you. We've all seen City, right? City put up 17 expected goals against Spurs and somehow come away 1-0 losers and stuff. These games happen. And I'm not saying we created as much as I'd like, but the last action wasn't right. And we're 1 week removed from a Lens game where every single last action was right. So I don't know if I want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say we need to rethink it, because I think there's another day you play this game and the last actions are right. And it's a massacre. Unlike the Newcastle game, where I can understand people being frustrated, because Newcastle game was a 1-point dropped game. I have this as 3 points dropped. I have this as a game that, based on the patterns of play and the way the game developed, we should have gotten 3 points. There's a few things I want to dig into in this. We do have to talk the refereeing stuff. Although, if what you want is a really emotional and full-throated reaction to the refereeing stuff, the instant reaction had that, because that was right at full time. Obviously, removed from it now, we can take a deep breath and we don't have to go there. But I think if we're if we're being honest, like this is probably the right time to talk about brands. I think that's what people are waiting for. So let's just do that very quickly. Look, based on how some of the refereeing stuff has been going this season, I think our first sponsor is one that we are thrilled to talk about, and that is this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp isn't online therapy; it's just therapy. Holidays can be hard for people. I feel like, I'm very fortunate to have two wonderful daughters, and my wife's great, and I have a safe home. I have had times in my life where I was not safe in my home, and that can be a devastating experience. And I feel for anyone that's gone through that or is going through that. The holidays in particular can bring that back to you, and it can be a time when you need that extra help. But you can't get to an office. You can't get in the car and drive there. You don't have time to go and come back. You don't have time to drive to a therapist and realize they're not a good fit for you. Because when I did therapy, the one thing that was absolutely critical is I found a therapist I really clicked with that was right for me. With BetterHelp, you can find that right person. You can do it camera on or camera off. You can do it without leaving the house. You can do it more affordably, but you can do it with a licensed therapist and get someone who just talk to you at a time when things are hard. Because also, like I said, I have friends. I have a partner in my wife. I have my parents who are still alive, thank God. It's none of their job to work through challenges with me. They may want to, but that's not. It takes a professional, right? When you go to the gym, you wouldn't just be like, oh, that guy over there could probably help me with my fitness routine. No, you need a trainer, right? It's the same thing. You need someone to work with you through this stuff. So in the season of giving, give yourself what you need with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/vision today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/vision. Do it now. And last but certainly not least, that's right, just a short one today. We're going to talk about Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform that helps you do it all. So many things that I like to tell you about Indeed, but I'll stick with the ones that I think are most relevant. So first of all, Indeed is a hiring platform. You only pay for the applicants that meet your must-have requirements. I think that's really important. You don't want to waste resources on applicants that aren't relevant. They let you consolidate to one job site. Like the one thing that I hated on the internet for years and years and years was when you had to do the same thing on 40 different sites to get the result that you wanted. Kind of like when the referees have to keep going to VAR to finally find a way to rule out an Arsenal goal or something like that. But in this case, you can do one job site that does it all. All right. You can have instant match with instant match. Over 80% of employers find the quality candidates they need the moment they sponsor a job post, according to US Indeed data, which is great. You only pay for your the applicants that must-have requirements. As I mentioned, join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that choose Indeed. Okay. Start hiring now with $75 sponsored job credit. Sponsor your post at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Okay, that's $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. You need to hire. You need Indeed. Terms of supply. You need Indeed. Clive, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. My copy for the Indeed ad wouldn't open, so I had to do it by memory. And yeah, that's off the dome, as they say. Okay. Clive, as a final point, just on the failure to execute, do you have a general diagnosis of what didn't go right? Like I don't think Odegaard was at his absolute best. I don't think Jesus had his absolute best. Martinelli, I think, really struggled. Saka was just off his best. I think Kai was the one of the five that thrived. But like, was it just 4 of the 5 guys had an off night all at the same time? Or is there something specific that Villa did that I'm not giving them credit for? Because obviously there's credit for Unai, and how could there not be? He's, a million games at home in a row that he's won, blah, blah, blah. But like, I don't see this as credit. I see this as their tactics didn't really work and we failed to punish them. So how do you diagnose that? And as a final diagnosis there.
Yeah, you can go for each one and say, you should have done this, should have done that. You should have analysis. Do you know what I mean? When the goalkeeper's lying on the floor, go to the roof, reverse it in the other corner. These things become apparent when you see the outcome, right? So we all saw it, didn't we? When the goalkeeper, who gambles a lot, by the way, and reverse shots is the way to beat him. So yeah, we just need to focus on that. So I don't think it's much in it. I think freshness of minds sharpen your technique. The technique is there. These players know how to kick a football, know how to score goals, make goals, create goals. It was just lost on the day. And I think it's just freshness of mind. This is the day where you need a set piece job. Do you know what I mean? A set piece goal, a little 1-0 near post flick header, gets you 1-0 up, and you got something to work with. You got something to work with. When you concede the first goal and you have to then fight for a goal, that adds tension to your finishing. It adds tension to your running because you're now striving to recover a situation. When a team is showing you all that green grass, you'll just get a little bit keen. And we had an opportunity with Martinelli and Saka really to score if they'd have made better decisions in those wide areas. We had enough. Odegaard had 2. One of those is a definite goal for him normally. We wouldn't.
Yeah.
We literally wouldn't pick any other player in the Arsenal world. And if we could pick him up and put him on a spot in the pitch to do his thing, we'd have put him there for that second chance when Havertz crossed it back. And so basically, it was just one of those things that didn't quite work out. There was lots of chat online about something called the ozone a week ago. And basically, the ozone didn't work out for Martin this week. But hey, it is what it is. We got to focus on resting those legs, getting their minds right, creating a different scenario for them. And also, with our Arsenal heads on, we got to think, how do you want to supplement the group, the 4 players we have in that front line? And people may argue with me, but I think it's 4. How do you make that 6 with real quality? And that's the next phase of our project, shall we say.
Yeah. It's so strange to feel this way given how much dominance we have on the ball in general and how much time we spend in the attacking third. But, again, we're 10th in non-penalty expected goals, but we're first in attacking third possession and second in attacking penalty area possession. We have to start converting this dominance into more goal scoring chances. Like if you said to me, Arsenal don't wind up winning the title, I will say that our regret at the end of the season will be the squandering of good positions, not converting good positions into goals. The team is not turning enough of our attacking moves into goals. Now, having said that, since Jesus has come back and since Kai has started to come on, we've been starting to see it improve. I think this game was a step back, but this game was interesting in the sense that, Clive, I think it's worth pointing this out. You get good at the things you do a lot, right? Except for me with podcasting. But by and large, people get good at the things they do a lot. To be fair, we mostly play low blocks and we're mostly spending our time trying to figure out moves that can break down low blocks. This team just doesn't play a lot of games like this. So we did the first action while beating the press. I thought, unlike Chelsea Spurs, where Chelsea calamitously just couldn't beat the press with 9 men standing on the halfway line, I think we beat the press well and we beat their high line well. We just didn't get the last action right. But do you think some of that is also down to the fact that, frankly, we just don't play that kind of game often? I think other than maybe in the Champions League, we haven't played that game at all.
I think there's a misconception, shall we say, that the whole game was on a halfway line. It wasn't. We pushed them back, second phase, etc., and then it became a slightly lower block game. And so it was we control the game. We were able to play transition football. We were able to play high line against high line football, and we're able to push it back into their box and create crosses, and goalkeeper took a few, etc. And so it was one of the first teams that have played us until they couldn't, and we haven't beaten. The teams in Europe have tried to play us, and we've beaten them handily. So I will say that don't just think it was a high-line game because it wasn't. That's just a memory that we have because it was so obvious what to do, and it never leaves you when you see things obvious on the screen. But yeah, Elliot, sometimes data is something that's showing you where a problem is, and you can't ignore it. And data sometimes matches the eye test. And if you forget what we go through as Arsenal fans and the emotions that we go through, we soon forget the high points and focus on the low points. But if you look at Arsenal and look at our improved defence at the moment, the fact that basically a shot goes in, it feels like that to me. And then you look at the data afterwards, you think, actually, we're like doing unbelievable our next year against. And then your eyes just go to the attack. And then you add stuff around the final box entries, last third entries, and you can't turn away from the fact that we need to improve in the last thing that we do. And that is the next thing for us, and we are 1 point off the top. So now the question is that in the club or is it outside of the club? Right? And that's it. Sometimes football analysis is really easy. Sharpen up, lads. Focus on your contact, focus on your stride pattern, sharpen up. sharpen up. Otherwise, maybe the answer's not in the club. And that's it.
Yeah.
Because the data you have, Elliot, the club has more data. Do you see what I mean?
Oh yeah, much better data and much better analysis of that data. But by the way, I think there's one thing too. You get so focused on your own house. I've seen people be like, oh, that's why Liverpool are going to win the title because they got better attackers or, blah, blah. But then you look and you say, well, actually, Liverpool had a terrible day attacking against Palace. And they got a little bit lucky, in a way that we didn't. And they lost the XG battle, by the way. And then you look at Manchester City. Manchester City went to Luton and produced less XG than we produced against Villa.
Yeah.
Against Villa, they had 2 shots and 0.6 XG. And again, not to make everything in the game about XG and things like that, but my point is simply we get so focused on ourselves that we think these other clubs that we're vying for the title with don't have problems. We're the only team that has problems because we lost a game. These teams are coming off terrible performances,
Yeah, exactly. And there was a frustration around this game, which I'm sure we'll come on to. There was a frustration around this game because we seem to have lost 2 games in similar style fashions where we've not been dominated. Do you know what I mean? So the frustration. But there isn't I hope there is, not in my life anyway, there isn't we need to rip this up type reaction. There's just like this will happen. And this will probably happen 2 or 3 more times this season. And we have to be ready for it. It's just how we react to it, and that's the most important thing. I think listening to Mikel and listening to the players, they all know where the problem was. Mate, you need to chuck it because they're on a plane today. You need to chuck it away really quickly. This is Monday as we're recording. They're on a plane, and so you can't dwell on these things. You just got to focus on your details. Focus on your details and you're prepped for the next game. So there you go.
Yeah, I do think that there's a problem, though, a minor problem. In general, I don't think the bench looked particularly strong. Now, we don't have everybody available, but I wouldn't say we're dealing with an injury crisis. I'm curious what you thought of the subs and the subs impact. There's probably a conversation to be had on a future pod. Maybe it's a Patreon pod where we can go specifically into squad depth and things like that, because I don't think we want to do 4 hours today, although we're always happy to. Reece Nelson, he signed a new deal. He stayed at the club. I'm not entirely sure that was in anybody's best interest. Emil Smith-Rowe is back in training, so that's really encouraging, but, not a factor in our season yet. Trossard has really obviously become that first guy who can come off the bench and make an impact. As I've already referenced, I don't think he made the kind of impact he would have liked in this game. And in general, I'm not sure he's been effective as a wide player for us, actually. I think some of his best performances have come either as an 8 or as a false 9. I think he's better interior than wide, and especially that left wing where Martinelli's role is hold the width and stretch the pitch. That's not a Trossard kind of role. Nketiah came on and, look, the header at the end looks bad, but ultimately I don't think you can blame him for that. The cross is too high, too hard.
Yeah.
But it is the fact that I didn't see anything on the bench that I felt really excited to call on. So what do you think, not only the subs performances, but the question of maybe looking light? We know we're light in the defensive area, but I feel that we are probably short that one extra bit of firepower in the attack.
Yeah, we went to Newcastle, didn't we? We lost unluckily there, and then we won every game for the last 6 in a row, 6 or 7 in a row, until Saturday, a game we lost that we dominated. So let's just put that perspective out there straight away. But
without putting the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, but if I step back, my point is around the gap between the group we trust versus the group that are fringe coming in, and the opportunities they have to play. And when they do come in, they tend to come in with capes on. They have to save us, and when they don't save us, we talk about it. You've not saved us. Our good guy that plays all the time has a bad day. You've come on and you haven't saved us. Then we start to look at analysis to how many times you score when you come off the bench and things like this, and so it's a challenge for them. It really is, and I have my thoughts. I like the Highlanders as finishers, shall we say, but they want to play, and they want minutes. They want to play. That moment's coming in their careers. We have 3 attacking Highlanders. That moment is coming in their careers. It is. They need to play more regularly to have a greater output. That moment is coming for all 3 of them. unless they're happy with their roles within the squad. So, yes, Elliot, I'm not happy with our squad depth per se, but it's just where we are in our cycle. I don't think, we should have done this, we should have done that. On the day, substitution wise, I would have done something slightly different. I see Trossard as an interior now. That's it. He's 29 years of age. We can't expect him to be Martinelli. He's not, right? He needs to play in lane 4, between the lane 4s maximum. Do you see what I mean? He's not a fifth lane guy any longer for me. I've seen him play left wing back for Belgium on occasions. But that's more like a deep playmaking role from that position, right? So yeah, the guy's a fantastic player, really good in the interior, and that's his future as a false 9 or one of the 8/10s in our team, right? So he's in the inside in the diamond. So we need an exterior player there, and that's where Nelson came in. So I would have made, my first change would have been Martinelli, Nelson, same style of player, straight in. And if you could take Jesus out, bring Trossard into the false 9 and try to knit something slightly different there, create a new face for them. By bringing on Eddie, you bring on the same face, just not quite as good as the face that's just gone off. When Trossard plays in there, you create a movement problem. You create somebody that's more intelligent in the interior. And that's what I would have done, and go from there. If you want to take Odegaard out later on and bring on a striker to try to steal something, then you do that. Right? So the way Havertz is playing now, you could push him out, push him up, drop Odegaard deeper in the first substitution phase, like to at Luton, play 2 strikers down the middle almost, and go from there. So yeah, it's details, mate. When they work, by the way, our substitutes scored more goals than anybody else. That means our change has been successful. When it works, we're fine. When it doesn't, we question, and that's our job. That's our job, as Roy Keane says.
It's interesting because we saw Jesus stay on the entire game at Luton. We saw Mikel stick with him. Obviously, makes the change in this game. Yeah. I think you have to be a little careful with that player because, as you would say, he holds our dreams in his hands. Whether you rate him or you don't rate him, I don't think we go where we want to go this season if he's not there. We've made some decisions. We made the decision to put Eddie on a bigger wage and keep him. We made the decision to put Nelson on a bigger wage and keep him. We made the decision to do the same with Emil Smith-Rowe. And at this point in time, if you said to me, we could have moved on from them and given other players a chance, gone into the market for a little something extra, I think I'd be leaning towards having done the latter. Because at the moment, there is a potential that you just see football as an endless build towards something else. I'm guilty of that. Squad building. Oh, this guy's on too big a wage, or that guy, you got to extract his value in the market. The goal isn't to endlessly build your squad. The goal is to win trophies and put them in the trophy cabinet. I realize that if there are Spurs fans listening, they weren't aware of that, but that is what you're meant to do. And there's not going to be many better chances to win the Premier League than now. And you might say, that's crazy. There's a strong Liverpool and there's a strong City, but not quite as strong as we've seen them be. I think we are well in it this season. And anytime you're well in it, you better go try to win it. Last season, we were well in it, but we had injuries. We didn't have the depth at the back. And that's probably why we didn't win it. Not to mention City just were too strong at the end. Yeah. But we're in it. And I said this on Twitter. I'll say this again. I don't know if we're favorites for the title, but we are absolutely right there with City and Liverpool as one of the 3 contesting it. And I don't see any reason we can't win it, and I won't be surprised if we do win it. I don't think there's any chance this season that we fall away from the chase. I can't see that. Now, I'm not saying it won't happen. I can't see that. And so these little things, like whether you trust that forward that's on the bench to come in and change a game, they matter. And right now I'm not sure we have the trust and confidence in those players. The reality is, this was a game where the starters didn't do it. The bench didn't do it. Everybody who got a chance in front of goal just didn't do it. And that's a shame. Just quickly on Trossard, I didn't think it was a good performance, but to your point, I don't think the role quite worked. And it was a weird period of the game. The only thing I really remember from Trossard's performance is actually losing the ball in our defensive third. And that's not really what he was there particularly to do. So,
I think we
not
could all
much
see.
to it. The game. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say we could all see it was a sprinters game. So when Martinelli came off, people could say, "Why did we take him off? Our danger went." But I think there are reasons for teams coming off, and potentially that's why we haven't seen him today training, right? So, and I could see that he was lacking freshness, and so I was fine with it. I was just gone another way. Elliot, our team has risk factors. The risk factors is we've got 5 defenders for 4 positions at the moment. And one of those people are sometimes not having defensively, right? So, and so
4.5 defenders.
we've got 2. We've got Timber injured. Back there. So that's a major blow. We only had 7 to start with, and now we've got Tomiyasu injured as well. We should start the league with 8, and we're already 1 down. So now we're 3 down. So risk factor right there. We want to rotate midweek. I don't know if we can. How much can we rotate? We're going to have to share games potentially between Sleeper and Gabriel. We're going to have to share that game to look after their legs, right? So we have a midfield that's just been reconstructed. That's starting to look okay. One of the key players in that has barely played a league game all season, right? And when he does get fit, he's going to pop off to the African nations, right? So that probably affected Havertz's assimilation to the team. He would have been smoother and more gentle, but now he's either come out the other end of that and people are forgetting people. But I think that player will come back in, and when games change in the new year, when games mean life, then we'll be looking at a different construction in that centre midfield area, trust me, to start games. So that's for when we turn the corner side of things. And we have a set of attackers that are data-wise not quite executing. We can look back to personnel, availability, relationships, injury, even to our skipper. So you know what? We're 1 point off the top after going through all of that. And I think we know where we are and what there is to fix. Some of that's on the training ground, some of that's with health and availability, and maybe a couple of is in the market to really manage that risk that we see due to long-term injury and maybe international tournaments, shall we say, in the first part of the year. So, very interesting period coming up.
Yeah, and there is always a tendency that you let the result guide your analysis. Ultimately, not your analysis. Like, that's a different thing. You may have to do that if you're being drug tested, but your analysis. Ultimately, I came away from this game feeling okay because it was another game where I thought, we looked like the better team, and failing to execute is frustrating, but I'd rather that than come away from a game feeling like, wow, our football really short-circuited and we were outplayed. I'll put it this way. I'd much rather be coming away from the performance we put up against Villa than the one City put up against Villa. I do want to give Emery credit for this. I think his subs in the second half towards the tail end had the desired effect. I think the game slowed down. We started to struggle to create momentum. I don't think our subs had the same impact. Not particularly that we were outcoached in that respect, but just I think his subs did a nice job of junking the game up, slowing it down, getting us out of our rhythm up until the very, very last kick of the game, essentially, which we'll come on to. But do you agree with that? There was some time wasting, but I don't think it was excessive. Emmy obviously did it, but Emmy is Emmy. I think his subs helped them wrangle the game back under control a little bit.
Yeah, I think because he got his goal earlier, he had to manage fatigue. He had to manage game state, which is we have a goal. We're not dominating the ball. We can't dominate the ball. We can't dominate any facet of the game. But what I can do is I can add fresher people to hold them off. And that's what he did. He changed both his fullbacks, and they got fresher as our wide men got tired. So and he was able to change the centre forward late and bring on a centre midfielder in Jacob Ramsey, who's quite bright. And they were able to keep doing their jobs for longer. Do you know what I mean? And it worked. It worked because the goals allow you to make the right decision because you got a goal, and you can now your decisions become easy. Your instructions become easy. When you're trying to create something, you're trying to do something else, and that's a much greater challenge. So first goals matter, mate. They really do matter from a coaching perspective. So yeah, it is honestly, Elliot, I'm so over this game. Most the parts of the game that will linger are things that are fixable, and there are other parts extraneous to the game which are so subjective around how the games are managed and how sport is managed that I'm in a much better place than I was 2-3 days ago after going to watch Arsenal women on Sunday and watching the purity of that game and seeing how wonderful it was. And I'll be off to a non-league game in Hitchin tonight to watch them play because I want to go and see sport, pure sport. Right? I need to go and see it to get myself back, get my balance back, to make sure I don't go into that tunnel where I become affected by every last action against our club. I need to go and get balanced because watching the women yesterday was just wonderful. And it reminds you that there's always another game. There is always another game. No matter how low you get about one game, there's another one and another one around the corner. And a lot of what we're doing is the right stuff. We just need to tune up, mate. Tune up, get some fresh legs again, and we go again against, well, we've got PSV, but we're all looking at Brighton, aren't we? We're all looking at Brighton.
Yeah, of course. And that is definitely a game, Brighton at home, where we owe them one. Last season, that was sort of the nail in the coffin, and you could see when they got their goal to take the lead. We had been well in that game. They got their goal to take the lead. I think you saw the collective spirit of the club just fold. That was like the last straw. So we owe them one for that pain, for that memory.
Sure do.
I think it is probably incumbent upon us now to do the section on the refereeing stuff. Dale Johnson does a column every week where he reviews all the VAR decisions and tells you what he thinks of them. I want to say one thing on that, by the way. There is this sense that he is the mouthpiece of the PGMOL or the mouthpiece of the league, and he's trotted out there to write this column to defend them. He works for ESPN. I'm sure his column is very popular. I have seen him be critical of the decisions. I think it is fatuous to say that he is instructed how to respond. I just don't believe that. Whether you agree with how he sees it or not is one thing. But I don't think he is trotted out there to say what the league wants him to say. The only reason I mention that is to tell you this. In his assessment today, he has all three of the contentious decisions in our game as being correct. That there is a handball by Kai Havertz, an accidental handball by the man who immediately scores the goal, that automatically rules it out. End of story. Those are the rules. And a lot of people seem to agree with that. In a moment, I'll explain to you where I think the issue with that is, but by and large, that seems to be the correct application of the rules. His claim is that there is a view of the elbow where you can see the player trying to sort of push the player away with his arm rather than swing an elbow targeting him. We'll come back to that in a moment. And then for the Jesus penalty, something along the lines of it's not forceful enough and not enough contact to be a penalty. Arsenal fans have zeroed in on the red card. I'll say this about the red card. If it had been given, there's no guarantee that a red card means you go on to win the game. Maybe Villa play in the lower block. Maybe they defend more and you actually create less. I think of all of these shouts, the one that's probably the most upsetting to me is the penalty. Because I feel like you see this all the time. One player gets his foot there before the other player, and the other player kicks it. And it's a penalty. Like we just see that all the time. And you know where you see it a lot? You see it on the edge of the box where there's no threat, no danger, right? A player goes to make a tackle. The attacking player gets his foot there just slightly ahead. He gets his ankle clipped, and it's a penalty. So I have the penalty as the worst one. The problem I have with the elbow one is the only view I've seen is like grainy Zapruder footage from like a very, very wide angle, and it looks really bad to me. But I wish I had a closer, clearer view. And then the last one, which is the one that upset me the most, but maybe is the one where the rules are clearest, is Kai Havertz accidentally handles the ball, then kicks it in the net. And by the letter of the law, that cannot be a goal. And apparently, the area of Matty Cash's arm that it hits is not low enough to be a handball. Clive, I'll start by saying this. My biggest issue with all of this, I don't know how Jared Gillett sees that handball. If you want to say, how can you be mad at a ref for getting the call right live? What I will say is he's so quick to rule out a goal. Compare that with the Newcastle game, where they allow a goal despite so many potential reasons not to. And then VAR goes and looks at it and doesn't find enough reasons to rule it out. If Gillett doesn't give that handball, if Gillett says it's a goal, I really think you're back in a situation where VAR is going to struggle to find clear, convincing evidence of an obvious error to overrule it. Some people may disagree there. I think the intention of the referee to want to rule that out so quickly from 20 yards away on the run, on the sprint with a player in front of him points to a difference in mindset, the desire to rule out the goal versus the desire to let it stand. And that bothers me. But do you have, how would you sort of rate your annoyance at those three, the correctness of them and the extent to which you've sort of rethought this since we pretty collectively lost our minds over this on the instant reaction?
Yeah, well, that was basically my feeling at the weekend. I felt there was for issues and incidents we will always disagree on forever and ever. But for me, I didn't like the approach to the incident because that revealed the mindset of the referee, which was linked to basically, for me, an inherent bias, right? An inherent issue with Arsenal Football Club. And I can't help but feel that when I'm looking at the screen and the manager's up in the gods, right? He's not even next to the team because he over celebrates goals. And we're watching. What happens then, Elliot, is that we then start to do what we do and videos start to fly around. And Chris Wilder gets his first home win, I think, at the weekend as a new Sheffield United manager. And he rightly celebrates, mate. And he didn't get booked. When Arteta got booked the other day, I think there were 6 substitutes in the corner of the pitch. He didn't get booked. Mm-hmm. They didn't get booked. They picked on him. And I can't help but feel it. And that's how I feel, right? And so for me, there's film going around today that Eddie got the last touch. So would that mean the goal should be allowed? I don't know anymore.
Yes.
It should be allowed. Has anyone been brave enough to say that in the main media? Has anyone been brave enough to say they could have got it wrong? Will we get an apology? I don't think so. If we do, I stand corrected, right? And again, the speed of the decision tells me where your head is, you know? And then, but if you think about it now, what's happened with VAR is, if he wants to guess, it doesn't matter. He can guess. Where's his accountability? He knows it's going to get checked. If he's right, he's a hero. If he's wrong, allowed. What does he lose? He loses nothing. And this is the problem that we're in. We're in a situation where if you choose on one certain day to see the game and the incidents one way, you can. And you can choose to see it another way. If you feel like, against Newcastle, they were pulling rules out of their backside to make that one stay on. There were 3 camera angles we couldn't see. No problem. We're going to give it. I've never seen two hands in the back be anything else but illegal, but hey, not to worry about it. Let's move on, shall we? And don't say a word about it. Be quiet. And we didn't stay quiet. And since then, it feels to me like we're being punished. My view on this whole scenario is VAR has created an ecosystem by which we look at football. And that ecosystem needs to be more consistent than what it is. You know, the Jesus penalty, in my life growing up, that's not a penalty. In the VAR world, that's a penalty. You know why? Because I've seen it. I've seen it before. I saw it on the same day at Crystal Palace. So it's just very, very inconsistent. And if I take it back a step, Elliot, we started the game talking about rooms. I think VAR was well intentioned when it first came in, but we've done something wrong with it. So let me give you an analogy, right, mate? If you have a wall and it's a bit chippy and you need to prepare it to wallpaper it, you know what? You're a bit lazy. Say you just papered over the wall. And eventually the cracks and the lumps and the bumps and where you took the plug out and the hole in the bottom of it will come through eventually. It feels to me with VAR, they've laid it on top of the game. But you know what? You've increased the shining light on the game, and the lumps and bumps in the game is there. What needs to happen before we implement it, we need to strip the game back, Make sure you prepared the wall before you put the wallpaper on. Strip the game back. Look at the laws. Make sure the laws are appropriate to the technology you're about to implement. If you're not going to do that, then you have a slower implementation of VAR. You keep it to lines, you keep it to offside, and everything else. You make sure you have a look at the laws and see how the game is developing and seeing where the next implementation of VAR should be. You don't just implement it and then decide how you want to roll with it. And it's a problem because you're now putting a light onto a subset of people. Probably, I think are they 20? I'm going to say 20. I may be wrong. There are 20 Premier League referees. So for me, I look at them like Formula One drivers. They are unique. There's only 20 of them in the world, and they are going to band together. It's natural. It's natural for them to band together. You wrong one, you wrong them all. The WhatsApp groups must be buzzing. You prepare for games. What have I got to prepare for Arsenal? The manager's a bit chippy. His coaches get off the line. We got to be harder on them to get them back in order. Don't think this stuff doesn't happen. It happens all the time. Trust me, I know from non-league upwards, it happens. You get an identity. An identity of Arsenal Football Club at the moment is we are the poster boys for a respect campaign. We're the poster boys for bad behaviour. And I'm sorry, the only way you manage that is by being a little bit harder on them to get them into line. And that's just normal behavior from an authoritarian organisation like a referee organisation, which they have to be to manage the game. Now, you could question, do they have to be that way? I don't know. But this isn't going to change unless we strip the wall back, mate, and have a look at our relationship with the referees, and our relationship between VAR and the rules. Are we prepared to do that? Probably not. We're probably going to add more scenarios into the game that's going to make us even more distant from the game and probably will drive people away from the game. That's what's going to happen because they don't recognize what they're watching any longer.
It's all well said. I really don't have much to add about that. I think I feel less aggrieved coming out of this game than I do out of the Newcastle game. Others may feel differently.
Agreed.
The reason being, first of all, I'm somewhat inclined to believe they got the final decision right. I don't like the intention to rule it out so quickly. But how can you be mad at a referee who ruled it out quickly and winds up being right? At the end of the day, that feels petulant. Whereas in the Newcastle game, it's the opposite. He was eager to let a goal stand, and they found a way to let it stand. The difference between the two bothers me. But in the Newcastle game, I don't think we did enough. And having said that, I don't think Newcastle did enough, and I think 0-0 was fair. In the Villa game, we should have put them to the sword. And the reason we didn't put them to the sword isn't anything to do with the refereeing. It's because we didn't do enough. And I think, again, if you play that game 10 times, 7 of the 10, we win it because we execute better. Yeah. And I've seen, like I said, I've seen us do it in the Lons game. 7 or 8 attacks, 6 goals. Some days it goes like that. Some days it goes like it did at Villa. And I think you have to take those days on the chin and be careful because we do a lot of pods and we do a lot of analysis and we do a lot of writing and we do a lot of reading and we do a lot of Twitter and we do a lot of, TikTok or whatever it is, of over analyzing a game where the answer might just be, we played pretty well. We didn't execute in the final third. You have those days. So I don't want to shrug, but I also don't want to over scrutinize. Look, we got to do 2 quick things before we get out of here. One is the PSV game. I know it is a fan thing to say, play the kids, play the kit man, right? Play the tea lady, play the kids, don't play any players. And normally I'd be the first one to raise my hand and say, I get that that's how we look at football, but that's not how the manager can look at it. I think he has to look at it that way. It's Brighton, then it's Liverpool. It is the absolute crux of the season coming up for us up until, probably the April, May timeframe. We got a lot we want to accomplish this season. We have topped the group. PSV also have nothing to play for. And I think that's critical in the analysis, Clive, because we wouldn't be disrespecting the game if we play a weak team because PSV have nothing to play for either. It is a true preseason dead rubber. So for you, are you ready to put your stake in the ground and say you'd be frustrated if anyone gets risked? And I'll say this, I think Mikel's setting himself up to have an excuse because he says Martinelli's sick, he won't travel. Saka has a foot issue, but he's going to travel. I think a lot of this is posturing to be like, well, I had to be careful with these guys because they weren't right. But who's going to get risked and how mad should I be about it?
Difficult to understand because the press conference not happened yet. There's a few things leaking out. And so, yeah, when I'm watching players fatigue at the weekend, making bad decisions, taking shots they shouldn't be taking and running offside when they shouldn't be running offside, I'm thinking, rest them all, flipping, get Gus Caesar's number and call him up and get him back in as a free transfer, right? So that's what I'm thinking. But yeah, I think when it comes down to it, it's still a high-level game in a competition that we want to wait 7 years to be in. And we will no doubt have a level of first-team rotation, shall we say. So maybe our centre-halves will share the game, one of them, and Kiwior will play the whole game. I would, maybe Cedric will play on the right-hand side, potentially, and Ben White may come on. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be something like that, Elliot. It'll be a sharing of game, but maybe more people will get minutes than you realise. But I think there's a couple of players I'd like to see. Obviously, Nelson, I'd like to see him get a game. I'd like to see Eddie get the game. Trossard get the game from the start potentially. It all depending on what you're going to do against Brighton, what your team is. Brighton is Sunday, so it's Tuesday to Sunday. Then we have a full week before Liverpool. So this is the last time for a little while before we're back to that 3 games in 7 days job. So no doubt it's going to be all load related. It's going to be data related from the club side of things as to who's close. Ben White doesn't look right to me, but we'll see. Not everyone agrees with me on that. But hey, look, I'm interested to see a couple of players. One in particular, actually, and it may not be the one that everyone's thinking, but I'm interested to see maybe one or two, maybe two. I'd like to see Raw Waters get some minutes. I want to see him play for the first team properly. And I would love to see Miles Lewis-Skelly get some minutes.
Yeah,
on this bit because I have seen him in real life, and I have seen him on the touchline with the first team group. And I look down and I'm thinking, mate, you're close. You're close physically. You can just see how someone's moving. You're close. You're closer than what your age should be telling you. And there's other players scoring 5 goals and they look much younger and smaller. And sometimes you just got to wait. To find out how exciting they are. You just got to wait. There's plenty of time. They're very, very, very young. But yeah, Miles Lewis-Skelly is somebody that I think has got a real chance, Elliot. And I would like to see him play.
And I think you have to be careful, Clive, because ideally, Clive, when you bring in a Miles Lewis-Skelly, or you bring in a Nwaneri, or you bring in whoever it is from the youth team, what you'd like to do is bring them into a relatively settled team, so they can play within themselves a little bit, get a feel for first team football at the Champions League level, and have a good first experience, right?
Yep.
And come away feeling like the credit in the bank. But if you bring them both in, along with Cedric and Kiwior at center back, and like a very mix and match team, it can go wrong away at a different. I mean, PSV can be a cauldron, and while they have nothing to play for, they'll want to beat an English side. So you have to balance that, right? Throwing Miles Lewis-Skelly and Nwaneri or
it's just minutes.
Yeah,
just minutes. Because we have Jorginho, we have
could throw him to the Wolves
we?
a bit,
Yeah, we have Jorginho, have El Neni, don't we? But El Neni did play 90 minutes for Egypt in the last international break. But maybe he does 70 minutes here, and then we bring on the kid for the last 20. Do you see what I mean by that? I think that would be really encouraging to people to see them get 20 minutes here and there on this pitch.
I think that's what's going to happen.
And I think that'd be brilliant. So good for so many people at the club to see that actually happen. We've earned the right to do it. We've earned the right to give them experience. They travelled in the last game, or they're in the squad in the last game to see what European Day looks like. This is such an opportunity for the club to show. And also, we're worried about depth. We started the conversation about depth. Sometimes you find depth by just looking at the team in a different way, in a nice, relaxed way, where results doesn't matter. Players feel relaxed and they can show you their wares. And suddenly you start to think about new systems, new formations, new solutions based on the new depth and seeing people play that haven't been playing. So these are days that excite me. I know Tim's going out there, isn't he? Mate, and these are days that are exciting, apart from not just the pre-game drinkies, to see people in a relaxed way playing for the club. I love these games. That's why I always go to pre-season friendlies. You learn a lot from them. You really do.
I think he can play Nelson and Ketty and Trossard as a front three. I think he can play El Neni, Jorginho, and a kid, an academy kid, as a midfield three. I think he's going to play Ramsdale goal. I certainly hope he does anyway. Give Ramsdale's Champions League debut. Where you run into problems is the back four.
Yeah.
White, Saliba, Gabriel, Zinchenko. I think at least two of them have to start because you can play Kivior, you can play Cedric. Who the hell else do you have?
And that's where Rule
am I
Waters
missing
comes
someone?
in. That's where Rule Waters, who is a fullback.
But what do you do at center back?
Yeah, and exactly.
So you go Cedric, Walters, Kivior, and...
You have to rotate it. You just have to... So one of our big players are going to play, and they're going to share the game. So Saliba, Gabriel, they're going to do half a game each. It's going to go that way.
Scary.
That's what... But there's nothing else we can do. You know, there's nothing else we can do.
I wouldn't risk Saliba. I'd let Gabriel go the 90 then. Or maybe not. I don't know. I mean, let's put it this way. I wouldn't risk Rice, obviously. I wouldn't risk Saliba. I wouldn't risk Saka, Martinelli, or Jesus. Everybody else can get some of the game. I probably wouldn't want to risk Odegaard either. But all right, well, we'll leave it there. I think that's good. As the last thing to say on the pod, would you say you're enjoying the United and Chelsea seasons? Is that fun for you? Because I'm enjoying them quite a bit.
Yeah, United. Well, you've got your view on them and what the data is telling you. Hey, look, I'm just pleased we sorted our own club out, right? Because we were heading down that path, but we turned and we changed. And we stripped the wall back, mate. We got people out. We stripped the wall back and we prepared to look at ourselves and we prepared to say, we have a problem. And this is what the problem is. And we're going to fix it. And hopefully the supporters can be patient with us. 2 8th places, maybe a bit of COVID not being in the room allows us to be patient than we normally would be. And suddenly we start to see something turn the corner. And here we are today where you are absolutely right, Elliot. No one is saying that Arsenal Football Club is in crisis at the moment because they can all see the performance. And I think we are much more a serious proposition this year than last year because we look rounded. We look like we're doing things that's very repeatable. So, yeah, that's where I am with it, mate. That's where I am with it at the moment. I just think let's just focus on this week, getting the game against PSV, and then Brighton. It's time for payback because they danced on our grave last year. They really danced and they enjoyed it, and they beat us handily, and we were broken. And I think it's time to get that one back, and then we're going to do about 45 pods pre-Liverpool, right? Because we'll be petrified by then, and we're going to need the counselling pre-game and after game. So there we go.
Yeah. Well, I find myself not feeling particularly concerned. You know, it's really weird because we've been through very hard times as fans, and I think that there are a lot of fans, and I understand this, who still struggle to see us as a competent, consistent, effective team because we wear the scars of the prior seasons. Certainly the last 2 seasons in a row where we fell away at the end in disappointing fashion, and the seasons before that where we were just a bit of a joke. But I don't see any of that in who we are now. And I see a lot of people saying, oh, but we're so thin. Any injury and our season's over. But just to be clear, Manchester City haven't won a game this season when Rodri's not available. Erling Haaland has a stress fracture in his foot. Kevin De Bruyne is still at least a month away from coming back. Where would Liverpool be if Mohamed Salah got injured? Where would Liverpool be if Virgil van Dijk got injured? I think we have this view that, and I understand why, the last 2 seasons have derailed because of injury. But we have this view that we are the team that is most likely to derail for that reason. But you just don't know how a season is going to go. And ultimately, I look at us and I say, there are 3 teams genuinely contesting this title who I expect to be there all the way to the finish line. But if any of these 3 teams suffers a significant loss of a significant player, that team will probably fall away. It has been us before, but that doesn't mean it will be us again. I do think January will be an interesting talking point. But it's not the easiest time to transform your hopes and dreams of a season. So we'll see what happens, and we have a little bit of time to get to that. We've gone a while now, so I think we can set it aside. There'll be an instant reaction following the PSV game for what that's worth. 3 big questions coming this week, I believe, as well as main pods and stuff. So there's just something for everybody. Thanks for being here. Hope that was a sober conversation. We had the opposite kind of conversation at full time the other day, but that's why I love doing the instant reaction. Get the hysteria out so we can bring you this measured analysis. And by the way, questions about Paul not having been on as much as people would like. Paul's just super busy with a lot of life stuff that he's fine. Everything's good, but it's hectic, and that happens. And, we're a team and we rotate and we bail each other out. So right now, maybe we're a little thin, but if nothing else, we are truly Arsenal to the core, aren't we? So thanks for bearing with us. Tim on his way to Eindhoven, hence not able to be here with us now. So Clive's on Twitter, Clive BFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name's Elliot, Bot and Gunner. We love you, and we will talk to you after the kids, the children, the kit man, the tea lady, go and beat PSV, Arsenal 10, PSV 0.